The words hit Karen like a physical blow. In her 15 years as HOA president, no one had ever simply quit. She stood frozen in the Hendersons' backyard, surrounded by curious neighbors, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "You can't quit," she finally sputtered. "It's in your deed restrictions. You signed a legal contract when you bought the house." Mike pulled out his phone and scrolled through his photos until he found what he was looking for, a legal document. "Actually, we had a lawyer review our contract last week. Turns out there's a provision that allows homeowners to withdraw from the association if they can prove unreasonable and capricious enforcement of regulations." Sarah stood up, her book still in hand. 17 violations notices for an empty pool seemed pretty unreasonable to our attorney. Karen felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. The neighborhood had gone eerily quiet, everyone straining to listen. Mrs. Patterson from 405 was openly recording with her phone. The Johnsons had emerged from their house in bathrobes, coffee cups in hand, like they were settling in for a show. "This is ridiculous," Karen declared, but her voice lacked its usual authority. Gerald, get over here." Her husband appeared from their front yard, looking like a man who'd been dreading this moment for months. "Karen, maybe we should just let it go." "Let it go?" Karen whirled on him, her eyes wild. "They're destroying everything we've built. The property values, the uniform aesthetic, the order." Janet Chen stepped forward from the growing crowd of onlookers. "Karen, I think Gerald's right. Maybe it's time to..." "At two, Janet?" Karen's voice cracked with betrayal. "I don't believe this. I spend my time, my energy, my weekends keeping this neighborhood beautiful, and this is the thanks I get." Mike's expression softened slightly. "Karen, nobody asked you to do that." The words landed like a slap. Karen looked around at her neighbors, really looked at them, and saw something she'd never noticed before. They weren't looking at her with respect or gratitude. They were looking at her with pity, annoyance, and in some cases, barely concealed relief that someone had finally stood up to her. I was protecting property values," she whispered, "by making everyone miserable." This came from Tom Bradley at 418, who rarely spoke to anyone. "Karen, my house is worth $30,000 more than when I bought it 5 years ago, and it has nothing to do with HOA rules. It's because we live in a good school district near downtown." The crowd murmured agreement, and Karen felt her worldview crumbling. Everything she believed about her role, her importance, her contribution to the neighborhood was being stripped away in front of everyone. But Karen Middlesworth hadn't become HOA president by backing down from fights. "Fine," she announced, her voice regaining some of its steel. "If you want to live in chaos, that's your choice. But don't come crying to me when this neighborhood turns into a slum." She turned on her heel and marched back toward her house, Gerald trailing behind her like a reluctant caboose. But instead of feeling victorious, she felt hollow. From her kitchen window an hour later, Karen watched Mike and Sarah Henderson, laughing as they planted herbs in their converted pool. Other neighbors had joined them, and someone had brought lemonade. It looked like fun. Karen picked up her phone and dialed her lawyer. If the Hendersons thought they could just walk away from the HOA, they had another thing coming. There had to be a legal way to fight this. But as she waited for the lawyer to answer, she noticed something troubling. A for sale sign being hammered into the lawn at 420 Maple Drive. Then another one at 408. For the first time since becoming HOA president, Karen wondered if she might be on the wrong side of this war. The phone rang once more before going to voicemail, and Karen realized she didn't actually know what she wanted to say anymore. Karen stood. Her moment of triumph arrived. "We escalate to phase 2. Daily compound fines, certified mail demands, and," she paused dramatically, "we contact the city about potential safety violations." Janet shifted uncomfortably. "Isn't that a bit much? It's just an empty pool." "Today it's an empty pool, Janet. Tomorrow it's pink flamingos in front yards. Next week, vegetable gardens where there should be grass. Where does it end?" Karen's eyes had taken on the gleam of someone who saw enemies everywhere. "I won't let this neighborhood fall into anarchy on my watch." The vote was 3-1. with Janet abstaining in protest. As the others left, Karen sat alone, drafting her escalation letter. She'd show the Hendersons, and anyone else thinking about challenging her authority, that Karen Middlesworth didn't back down from a fight. Outside, Mike Henderson was installing a small fountain in the empty pool, humming to himself. The certified mail returned unopened. The daily fine notices disappeared from the Hendersons' mailbox without acknowledgement. And still, the pool remained defiantly empty, now adorned with what appeared to be a small herb garden growing along its shallow end. Karen stood in her driveway at 5:30 a.m., cell phone pressed to her ear with the intensity of someone reporting a national emergency. "Yes, I understand you're busy, but this is a legitimate safety concern. What if a child falls into that concrete pit of defiance?" The city inspector, unfortunately named Chad, sounded as enthusiastic as someone being asked to work overtime on their birthday. "Ma'am, if the pool is drained and fenced, there's no safety violation. People are allowed to modify their own property as long as it meets code. But the HOA covenants clearly state, that's between you and your neighbors, lady. The city doesn't enforce HOA rules." Karen hung up, her face cycling through several shades of red before settling on a dangerous purple. She marched across the street, her power-walking sneakers squeaking with determination. Mike Henderson was on his hands and knees, planting what looked suspiciously like tomatoes in the deep end of his former pool. His wife Sarah sat nearby, reading a book and occasionally looking up to smile at their handiwork. "Mr. Henderson." Karen's voice could have shattered bulletproof glass. "This has gone far enough." Mike looked up, dirt on his hands and genuine confusion on his face. "Oh, hi Karen. Nice morning, isn't it? Don't you nice morning me? You've ignored 17 certified notices, accumulated $1,247 in fines, and turned your backyard into a farming operation." Sarah looked up from her book, marking her place with a finger. "Actually, it's called permaculture. We're creating a sustainable food ecosystem. The pool was cracked beyond repair, so we thought." "I don't care what you thought." Karen's composure was cracking like ice in spring. "You can't just decide to ignore the rules because they're inconvenient. Do you have any idea how hard I work to maintain property values in this neighborhood?" Mike stood up, brushing dirt from his knees, his patience wearing thin. "Karen, we've lived here for 8 years. We've paid every HOA fee, attended every mandatory meeting, and followed every rule. But our pool was literally falling apart. The repair estimate was $15,000 for something we don't even use anymore. Then you should have filed for a variance, gone through proper channels. You can't just." "We did file for a variance," Sarah interrupted quietly. 3 months ago, you rejected it without explanation and told us pools were mandatory aesthetic features that couldn't be removed under any circumstances." Karen blinked, momentarily stunned. She remembered that meeting. She'd been so focused on maintaining uniformity that she hadn't even considered their reasoning. That's beside the point. Rules exist for a reason." "What reason, Karen?" Mike's voice carried 8 years of accumulated frustration. "What possible reason could there be to force us to maintain a broken pool we don't want and can't afford to fix?" For the first time in months, Karen found herself without an immediate answer, but instead of reflecting, she doubled down. "Because I said so. Because the HOA voted on it. Because that's how civilized society works." She was shouting now, her voice carrying across the neighborhood like an air raid siren. Several neighbors had emerged from their houses, drawn by the commotion. Mike and Sarah exchanged glances, and Mike made a decision that would change everything. "Karen," he said calmly, "we quit the HOA." Karen Middlesworth nearly choked on her morning coffee when she spotted it from her kitchen window. The Hendersons' backyard pool, completely drained, revealing a concrete crater that looked like a meteor had crashed into Willowbrook Estates. Her perfectly manicured fingers trembled as she set down her world's best HOA president mug, her mind already racing through the 17 different homeowners association violations this represented. "Gerald," she shrieked, her voice carrying the pitch of a smoke detector, "get the violation book." Code red situation at 412 Maple Drive. Her husband Gerald shuffled into the kitchen, still in his bathrobe. What now, Karen? Did someone leave their garbage can out 5 minutes past pickup time again? Worse. Karen's eyes glittered with the fervor of someone who'd found their life's purpose. The Hendersons drained their pool without HOA approval. That's Section 7.3b, subsection 4. Major landscape modifications. Plus Section 12.1. Potential safety hazards. And don't even get me started on the aesthetic degradation clause. Gerald sighed, recognizing the signs. When Karen got like this, it was like watching a tornado form, beautiful in its terrible power, but devastating to everything in its path. Maybe they're just keening it. Without filing Form 27C for temporary pool maintenance. Gerald, are you even listening to yourself? Karen was already marching toward her home office, her slippers slapping against the hardwood with military precision. Her war room, as she called it, contained 3 filing cabinets full of HOA documentation, a corkboard covered in photos of violations, she called it her wall of shame, and a telescope pointed directly at the neighborhood. She grabbed her official HOA violation pad, the one with the gold-embossed letterhead that made her feel like a federal judge. Her pen hovered over the paper as she calculated the potential fines. $200 for the initial violation, $50 per day until corrected, plus a $100 administrative fee. Her heart raced with excitement. "This is it, Gerald," she announced, signing her name with a flourish. "This is how we show these people that rules matter, that order matters, that the HOA won't tolerate chaos." Within 20 minutes, Karen had marched across the street in her power-walking outfit, knocked on the Hendersons' door with the authority of someone serving a court summons, and thrust the violation notice into the hands of a very confused Mike Henderson, who was still in his pajamas. "You have 72 hours to restore your pool to compliance or face escalating penalties," she declared, already imagining how this victory would look in the next HOA newsletter. She had no idea she'd just lit a fuse that would explode her perfectly ordered world. 3 days later, Karen stood at her kitchen window at exactly 6:47 a.m., binoculars trained on the Henderson property like a general surveying a battlefield. The pool remained empty. Worse, Mike Henderson was now sitting in a lawn chair next to it, drinking coffee and reading a newspaper as if he didn't have a care in the world. "The audacity," Karen muttered, her jaw clenched so tight it could crack walnuts. She speed-dialed her emergency HOA board meeting protocol. "Linda, it's Karen." "Yes, I know it's not even 7 a.m. We have a situation. The Hendersons are in direct defiance of a formal notice. I'm calling an emergency session for tonight." By 7 p.m., Karen's living room had transformed into a tribunal. She sat at the head of her dining table, flanked by the 3 other board members. Linda Kowalski, treasurer and Karen's closest ally. Bob Martinez, secretary and local mailman who mostly wanted free cookies. And reluctant Vice President Janet Chen, who'd only joined to keep Karen from going completely unchecked. "The evidence is clear," Karen announced, unveiling a foam board covered in photos she'd taken of the Henderson property. Day 1, empty pool. Day 2, still empty, with additional lawn furniture added, a clear escalation. Day 3, active defiance through recreational reading. Janet rubbed her temples. "Karen, maybe we should just talk to them. Find out why they drained the pool. There might be a good reason. The reason doesn't matter." Karen's voice rose to a crescendo that made Bob's hearing aid squeal. "Rules are rules, Janet. When we start making exceptions, we're no better than Fan." She searched for the most devastating comparison. A neighborhood without an HOA. The room fell silent at this ultimate horror. Linda nodded vigorously. "Karen's right. I drive past 12 different neighborhoods on my way to work, and you can tell immediately which ones don't have proper association oversight. Chaos. Pure chaos." "So what do you propose?" Bob asked, reaching for his 3rd chocolate chip cookie.